voices of stones. It seems to us that we see and understand something. However, all that proceeds around us we sense very confusedly, just as a snail senses confusedly the sunlight, the darkness and the rain. Sometimes in things we also sense vaguely their difference in function, i.e. their real difference. On one occasion, when walking across the Neva, Ouspensky and a friend fell silent as they approached an old fortress. Then gazing up at its walls they reflected, there too are visible factory chimneys, and indeed behind the walls of the fortress appeared some factory chimneys blackened with smoke. In this moment they both sensed the difference between the chimneys and the old fortress prison walls. They realized the difference between the very bricks themselves, and the revelation seemed quite electrifying. Ouspensky's friend noted that he always felt these differences in objects and was deeply convinced of their reality. Positivism assures itself that a stone is a stone and nothing more, he noted, but any simple woman or child knows that a stone from the wall of a church and a stone from the wall of a prison are quite different things. When considering a different phenomenon in relation to all the chains of sequence of which it is a link, we should see that the subjective sensation and therefore difference between two physical objects, that we are accustomed to think of only as poetic expression or metaphor, the reality of which we deny, is entirely real. We should see and understand that two otherwise very similar objects can in actual fact be very different. Just as different as the candle and the coin that appear as similar circles or moving lines in the two-dimensional world of the plane being. We should understand that things of the same material constitution but different in their function are really very different, and that this difference goes so deep as to make different the very material which is otherwise physically the same. There are differences in stone, in wood, in metal and in paper that no chemistry will ever detect. However, these differences do truly exist, and there are those who are able to feel and understand them. The mast of a sailing ship, the beams of a gallows and a crucifix at the crossroads on the way to Galilee, these may all be made of the same kind of wood, but in reality they are different objects made of different material. That which we see, touch and investigate is nothing more than circles on a plane made by a different coin or candle. They are only the shadows of real things, the substance of which is contained in their function. The shadow of a sailor, of a hangman and of an ascetic may be quite similar. It is impossible to distinguish between them by their shadows, just as it is impossible to find any difference between the wood of a mast, a gallows and of a cross by chemical analysis. However, there are different men and different objects, their shadows only are equal and similar. If we take people as we know them, the sailor, the hangman and the ascetic, then those who seem to us similar and equal, when considering them by their differences in function, we see that there is nothing in common between them. They are quite different beings, belonging to different categories, to different planes of the world between which there are no bridges or avenues at all. These individuals seem to us equal and similar because in most cases we see only the shadows of real facts. The souls of these people are actually quite different not only in their quality, their magnitude and their age, as some prefer to put it, but as different in the very nature, origin and purpose of their existence as things belonging to entirely different categories can be. When we can begin to understand this, then the general concept, human, will take on an entirely different meaning. This relation holds true in the examination of all phenomena. The mast, the gallows and the cross, these are things belonging to such different categories that the atoms of such different objects, known purely by their function, cannot be similar at all. Our misfortune arises from the fact that we regard the chemical composition of a thing as its most real attribute, while in actual fact its true attributes must be sought for in function. Could we but broaden and deepen our vision of the chains of causation, the links of which are forged by our actions and by our conduct, could we but learn to see them not only in their narrow relation to the life of the individual, indeed to our own personal life, but in their broader cosmic reality, then we would succeed in finding and establishing a connection between the simple phenomena of our own life and the life of the cosmos. Without doubt, in these simplest of phenomena would be unraveled for us an infinity of the new and the unexpected. In this way we might come to know something entirely new about those simple physical phenomena that we are accustomed to regard as natural and obvious, about which we think that we know a little, Yet unexpectedly we may find that we actually know nothing at all, and that everything previously known about them is an incorrect deduction made from incorrect premises. There may be revealed to us something infinitely great and immeasurably important in such phenomena as the expansion and contraction of solids, electrical phenomena, heat, light, sound, the movement of planets, the coming of day and night, the change of seasons, and even a thunderstorm or lightning. Generally speaking, we may find explained in the most unexpected manner the properties of phenomena that we used to accept as given, suddenly containing nothing within themselves that we could not now see and understand. The constancy, the time, the periodicity or unperiodicity of phenomena may take on quite a new meaning and significance for us. The new and unexpected may reveal itself in the transition of some phenomena into others. Birth, death, the life of man, our relations with others, love, enmity, sympathies, antipathies, desires, passions, these may all unexpectedly receive illumination from an entirely new source. It is impossible to imagine the newness that we can sense in familiar things, and until felt it would be difficult to understand. However, it is really only our inaptitude to feel and understand this newness that divides us from it, because we are living in and amidst it. Our senses are too primitive, and our concepts too crude for that fine differentiation of phenomena that must unfold to us in higher space. Our minds and our powers of correlation and association are insufficiently elastic to enable us to grasp new relations. Therefore, the first emotion at the raising of the curtain on that world, this same world but free of those limitations under which we usually regard it, must be of wonderment, and this wonderment must grow greater according to our expanded acquaintance with it. The better we know a certain thing or a certain relation of things, the nearer, the more familiar they become to us, the greater will be our wonder at the new and unexpected therein revealed. Desiring to understand the noumenal world, we must search for the hidden meaning in everything. At present we are too enslaved by the habits of positivism and search always for visible cause and visible effect. Under this weight of positivistic habit, it is extremely difficult to comprehend certain ideas. Among other things, we experience difficulty in understanding the reality of the difference in the noumenal world between objects of our world that are similar, yet different in their function. If we desire to approach an understanding of the noumenal world, then we must try to notice all those seemingly subjective differences between objects that sometimes astonish us, of which we are often painfully aware, those differences expressed in the symbols and metaphors of art that are often revelations of the world of reality. Such differences are the realities of the noumenal world, far more real than all the maya or samsara, the illusion of our phenomenon. Wishing to understand the noumenal world, we must seek a hidden meaning in everything. We must endeavor to notice these realities and to develop within ourselves the ability to feel them, because in this manner and only by such method do we put ourselves in contact with the noumenal world or the world of causes. All art consists of understanding and representing these elusive differences. Art sees more and further than we do. Art is already a beginning of vision. It sees much more than the most perfect apparatus. There is no side of life that will not reveal to us an infinity of the new and the unexpected if we approach it with knowledge that it is not exhausted by its visible aspect. An example is given of understanding the hidden meaning of phenomena in The Occult World, written by A.P. Sonnet, in which is transcribed the letter of a Hindu occultist. Quote, "We see a vast difference between the two qualities of two equal amounts of energy expended by two men, of whom one, let us suppose, is on his way to his daily quiet work and the other, on his way to denounce a fellow creature at the police station. While men of science see no difference in this, they note the difference between the energy in the motion of the wind and that of a revolving wheel. Every thought of man upon being evolved passes into the inner world and becomes an active entity by associating itself and coalescing itself with an element, that is to say, with one of the semi-intelligent forces of the kingdom." End quote. If we ignore the last part of this quotation for the moment and consider only the first part, then we see that men of science do not recognize the difference in the quality of energy expended by two individuals going, one to their work and another to denounce someone. For the man of science, this difference is negligible. Science does not sense it and does not recognize it. Perhaps the real difference lies much deeper and consists not in the different modes of energy, but in the difference between people, one of whom is able to develop energy of one sort and another, that of a different sort. Now we have a form of knowledge that senses the difference, knows and understands it, speaking here of art. The musician, the painter, the dancer, the illustrator and the sculptor well understand that it is possible to walk differently, and even impossible not to walk differently. A workman and a spy cannot walk alike. Better than all, the actor understands this, or at least he should understand it better if they wish to excel in their art. The poet understands that the mast of a ship, the gallows and the cross are each made of different wood. They understand the difference between the stone from a church wall and the stone from a prison. They hear the voices of stones and understand the whisperings of ancient places, the tumuli, mountains, rivers, woods and plains. They hear the voices of the silence and understand the psychological differences between silences, knowing that one silence can differ greatly from another. This poetical understanding of the world should be developed, strengthened and fortified, because only by its aid do we come into contact with the true world of reality. In the real world, behind phenomena which appear to us similar stand noumena so different that only by our blindness is it possible to account for our concept of the similarity of these phenomena. Through just such a false idea, the misguided belief in the similarity and equality of men has arisen. In reality, the difference between the hangman, the sailor and the ascetic is not an accidental difference of position, state and heredity as materialism tries to assure us. Nor is it a difference between the stages of one and the same evolution as theosophy affirms. It is a deep and impassable difference such as exists between murder, work and prayer, involving entirely different worlds. The representatives of these worlds may seem to us to be similar, but only because we see not them, but their shadows only. It is necessary to accustom oneself to the thought that this difference is not metaphysical, but entirely real. More real in fact than many visible differences between things and between phenomena. All art, in essence, consists of the understanding and the representation of these elusive differences. The phenomenal world is merely a means for an artist, just as colors are for a painter and sounds for a musician. A means for the understanding of the noumenal world and for the expression of that understanding. At the present stage of our development we possess nothing so powerful an instrument of knowledge of the world of causes as art. The mystery of life dwells in the fact that the noumenon, i.e. the hidden meaning and function of a thing, is reflected in its phenomenon. A phenomenon is nothing more than the reflection of a noumenon in our sphere. The phenomenon is the image of the noumenon, its shadow. It is possible to know the noumenon by means of the phenomenon, but in this field all the chemical reagents, the spectroscopes and other apparatus with which we attempt to view the world can accomplish nothing. Only that fine apparatus which is known as the soul of an artist can understand and feel the reflection of the noumenon in the phenomenon. In art it is necessary to study occultism, the hidden side of life. An artist must be clairvoyant. They must see that which others do not see with clear vision, and be a magician, possessing the power to make others see that which they do not themselves see, but which can yet be perceived. Art sees more and farther than we do, and as was previously stated, we usually see nothing but merely feel our way, using the feelers of our sensory apparatus. The worm or the snail in man. We therefore do not notice the differences between things that cannot be expressed in terms of chemistry or physics. Art is the beginning of vision, as it sees vastly more than the most perfect scientific apparatus can discover, and it senses the infinite invisible facets of that crystal, one facet of which we call man. Mabel Collins, author of Illusions, published by the Kessinger Publishing Company in 1905 notes, "The truth is that this earth is the scene of a drama of which we only perceive scattered portions, and in which the greater number of the actors are invisible to us." Art sees further than mere human sight, and with regard to certain aspects of life, art alone has the right to speak. A remarkable attempt to portray our relation to the noumenal world, to the greater life, is found in Book 7 of Plato's Republic. Quote, "Behold, human beings living in a sort of underground den, They have been there from their childhood and have their legs and their necks chained. The chains are arranged in such a manner as to prevent them from turning around their heads. At a distance above and behind them, the light of a fire is blazing, and between the fire and the prisoners there is a raised walkway. You will observe, if you look, a low wall built along the way, like the screen which marionette players have before them, over which they show their puppets. Imagine men passing beside the wall carrying vessels that appear over the wall, also figures of men and animals made of wood, stone and various other materials, and some of the passers-by, as you would expect, are talking and some of them are silent. This is a strange image, he said, and they are strange prisoners. Like ourselves, I replied, and they see only their own shadows, or the shadows of one another which the fire throws on the opposite wall of the cave. True, he said. How could they see anything but the shadows if they were never allowed to turn their heads? And of the objects that are being carried in like manner they would see only the shadows. Yes, he said, and if they were permitted to talk with one another, would they not suppose that they were naming what was actually before them? Very true, and suppose further that the prison had an echo which came from the other side, would they not be sure to fancy that the voice which they heard was that of a passing shadow? No question, he replied. There can be no question, I said, that the truth would be to them just nothing but the shadows of the images. That is certain, and now look again, and see how if they are released and cured of their folly. At first, when one of them is liberated and compelled suddenly to go up and turn his neck around and walk and look at the light, then he will suffer sharp pains. The glare will distress him and he will be unable to see the realities which in his former state he had seen as only shadows. And then imagine someone saying to him that what he saw before was an illusion, but that now he is approaching real being and has a truer sight and vision of more real things. What will be his reply? And you may further imagine that his instructor is pointing to the objects as they pass and requiring him to name them. Will he not be in difficulty? Will he not fancy that the shadows which he formerly saw are truer than the objects that are now shown to him? Far truer. And if he be compelled to look at the light, will he not have a pain in his eyes which will make him turn away, to take refuge in the object of vision that he can see, and which he will conceive to be clearer than the things that are now being shown to him? True, he said, and suppose once more that he is reluctantly dragged up a steep and rugged ascent, held fast and forced into the presence of the sun. Do you think that he will be pained and irritated? And when he approaches the light he will have his eyes dazzled and will not be able to see any of the realities that are now affirmed to be the truth. Not all in a moment, he said. He will require to get accustomed to the sight of the upper world. And first he will see the shadows best, next the reflections of men and other objects in the water, and then the objects themselves. Next he will gaze upon the light of the moon and the stars. And will he not see the stars and the sky by night better than the sun, or the light of the sun by day? Certainly, and at last he will be able to see the sun, and not mere reflections of him in the water, but he will not see him as he is in his own proper place, and not in another, and he will not contemplate his nature. Certainly, and after this he will reason that the sun is he who gives the seasons and the years, and is the guardian of all that is in the visible world, and in a certain way the cause of all things which he and his fellows have been accustomed to behold. Clearly, he said he would come to the other first and to this afterwards. And when he remembered his old habitation and the wisdom of the den and his fellow prisoners, do you not suppose that he would felicitate himself to the change and pity them? Certainly he would, and if they were in the habit of conferring honors upon those who were quickest to observe and remember and foretell which of the shadows went before and which followed after and which were together, do you think that he would care for such honors and glories, or envy the possessors of them? Would he not say with Homer, better to be a poor man and have a poor master, and endure anything, than to think and live after their manner? Yes, he said, I think that he would rather suffer anything than live after their manner. Imagine once more, I said, that such a one coming suddenly out of the sun were to be replaced in his old situation. Is he not certain to have his eyes full of darkness? Very true, he said, and if there were a contest, and he had to compete in measuring the shadows with the prisoners who have never moved out of the den during the time that his sight is weak and before his eyes are steady, and the time that would be needed to acquire this new habit of sight might be very considerable, would he not be ridiculous? Men would say of him that up he went and down he comes without his eyes, and that there was no use in even thinking of ascending, and if anyone tried to loose another and lead him up to the light, then let them only catch the offender in the act and they would put him to death. No question, he said, this allegory, I said, you may now append to the previous argument. The prison is the world of sight, the light of the fire is the sun, the ascent and vision of the things above, you may truly regard as the upward progress of the soul into the intellectual world. And you will understand that those who attain this beatific vision are unwilling to descend to human affairs, that their souls are ever hastening into the upper world in which they desire to dwell. And is there anything surprising in one who passes from divine contemplation to human things, misbehaving himself in a ridiculous manner? There is nothing surprising in that, he replied. Anyone who has common sense will remember that the bewilderments of the eyes are of two kinds, and arise from two causes, either from coming out of the light or from going into the light, which is true of the mind's eye, quite as much as of the bodily eye. And he who remembers this when he sees the soul of anyone whose vision is perplexed and weak, will not be too ready to laugh. He will first ask whether that soul has come out of the brighter life, and is unable to see because unaccustomed to the dark, or having returned from darkness to the day, is dazzled by excess of light. And then he will count one happy in his condition and state of being.